Hey everybody, this is Caitlin and you are watching Zombie Eats Books. So I want to catch up on all the books that I read in February and March actually, but that'll have to wait until a later video. I don't think I'm going to continue to do this wrap-up thing where I wait until the end of the month. I used to do this thing where I would wait until I read 3 books or 4 books and then do a review no matter what the time of the month was. And I'm gonna go back to that because my reviews tend to be a lot better when I do it that way. And I remember a lot more. Anyway, the first book that I read in February was Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon. This was a sci-fi that has been going around BookTube quite a bit, and I was pretty excited to read it, and I wasn't disappointed. This was a very good book. I didn't fall in love with it the way that I expected to, but I definitely enjoyed it. This is about a young protagonist. Her name is Astrid, and she lives on a spaceship that is divided into different levels. So on the lower levels live people of color who are essentially slaves, and then on the upper levels are white people who are in power and have been exploiting the people on the lower decks of the ship so that they can live this sort of gilded, privileged lifestyle. Astrid lives on the lower levels. She is someone that doesn't conform to stereotypical gender roles. She's also somewhere on the spectrum. She's extremely intelligent. She has learned about medicine through a friend of hers, but then also just through her own intelligence and ambition and curiosity. Obviously, this addresses the trauma of slavery and issues of race and how people have manipulated things like religion on this ship in order to keep people below them. I loved Astrid as a character. I think she was very different as a protagonist, and she ends up having to make decisions about this world that she lives in and deciding if she is a person that can create change. And if she were to do that, how would she do that? I loved seeing her journey. I loved the characters that were around her. They were complex as she was complex. And I like the ending as well. The ending was a little unexpected. So yeah, I would highly recommend this. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Octavia E. Butler is just an author that continues to impress me. I love her writing. I love the themes that she incorporates in her writing. She always has very interesting themes. This book is about a sort of a post-apocalyptic world where people have destroyed the earth, or destroyed the earth enough in some way that resources are getting scarce. And the protagonist, I think her name is Lauren, lives in this sort of sheltered community. And there are communities like this across the United States where there's some kind of gate or something that keeps the scavengers that live on the other side out. The scavengers will basically do anything to survive, as people do, and it's turned into an ugly, brutal world. Lauren sees that this precarious balance between these two realities isn't going to always be there, that someday these gates are going to come down while the generation before her is sort of lingering in the past and can't accept present day reality and is thinking about how things are going to go back to the way they were. So what Lauren does in response to this is she starts developing her own religion and preparing herself for the future. And this religion is sort of about change. Well, I mean, it's not sort of about change, it is change. It's like God as change, and I loved that. Obviously, strong themes of community in here, and family, and what makes family, and how people react to survival situations, what they turn into as a person, how they adapt, how they change, and how you can make choices based on an overall philosophy, how you can say, you know what, I'm not going to do this in the future. This is one thing that I won't do. And I'm going to think in this certain way that will result in the kind of changes that I want to happen. So yeah, once again, I think Octavia E. Butler just wrote a fascinating book. I'm looking forward to reading the sequel to this and any of her other novels. I'm just gonna go through her works. This is my 3rd Butler, so I haven't really gone that deeply into her works, but they're on the shelf, so I'm certainly planning on it. I gave this a 3.5 out of 5 stars. So the next book that I read for Black History Month was The Fire This Time by Jesmyn Ward. And this is actually a collection of essays and poems on race written by different authors of color. I really enjoyed this. I thought it was very interesting. Of course, I thought that some of the essays were better than others, but for the most part, they all were still very interesting and chose very interesting topics to write about as well. One essay mentions Rachel Dolezal, which I thought was interesting, and then there was another essay about this young man who used to live in Jamaica and how he loved to walk the streets of Jamaica and how that just became a really fulfilling pastime for him. He would be, you know, in the middle of the city and experiencing the city, and he loved that feeling. And then when he moved to the United States, he couldn't do that simply because of the color of his skin. It became a very different experience for him. There was also a poem in here that I really enjoyed. Just a great collection. It introduced me to a lot of new authors that I'll be looking into further, and I would highly recommend this. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So at that point, I kind of got sidetracked from Black History Month or Black Future Month because a couple of books came in the mail. And so I ended up reading those because I have no self-control. My Name is Lucy Barton by Elizabeth Strout is the book that I picked up, and I have read Elizabeth Strout before. I read Olive Kitteridge, which I really loved. It's such a good book if you haven't read that. But this is no different. I also really enjoyed it. Maybe not as much as Olive Kitteridge, but I still really love this. This is sort of a very simple narrative, or at least deceptively simple narrative of Lucy Barton, who is in the hospital and her mother comes to come visit her. And through this very sort of strange, long conversations that they have, or conversations throughout her hospital stay, I should say, you start to learn more about Lucy Barton and about her mother and her family in general and the town that she grew up in, which is this rural community that she sort of escaped from, essentially. There were some really poignant scenes in here. I thought this was written very simply but very beautifully. There is one scene in particular that involves Lucy Barton and a truck. And I'm not going to spoil it for you if you haven't read this already, but if you have read it and you know what I'm talking about, that scene broke my heart, and it was, I think, one of the strongest scene in this book for me. Anyways, this is about identity. It's about growing up in a rural community and what that's like, how the community views education, how they view themselves and what they're capable of, what they think they're capable of, and family life and how that affects you. And I really, really loved it. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. So of course the book that came with that, which I had to read after I read that one, was Anything is Possible by Elizabeth Strout. And this is sort of a sequel to My Name is Lucy Barton, but it's very different. So it is actually told from the perspectives of the people that live in the community that Lucy Barton grew up in. And instead of focusing on her, which is what Olive Kitteridge did, Olive Kitteridge was this collection of short stories of people that were related to Olive Kitteridge in some way, not like blood relation, but just were associated with her in some way. And some of them were very distant, but all of them told you something about Olive Kitteridge. This, in contrast, doesn't focus on Lucy Barton or necessarily tell you more about Lucy Barton. It just focuses on the community members and their lives and how they've been affected by the same sort of things that Lucy Barton went through, but how differently different people react, you know, how differently they thought about their futures than Lucy did. And then also one important thing to mention as well is that there is a perspective in here. It's from the perspective of Lucy's brother when Lucy actually comes back and visits. So that was sort of neat to see after reading My Name is Lucy Barton and seeing her actually coming back to the community and seeing what happens then. Yeah, so I really enjoyed this. I didn't love it. I didn't fall in love with it the way that I fell in love with the first book, but I gave it a 3 out of 5 stars, I believe. Anyway, that was my reading month in February. I didn't get to all the books that I had planned on getting to, or even stick to the theme of the month like I wanted to, but I did at least read some of those, so I'm happy with myself because I tend to rebel against myself a lot and, you know, just go completely against the plan. Anyways, if you've read any of these books, or if you'd like to read any of these books, please comment below. Let me know what you thought about them or what intrigued you about them, and tell me what you're reading right now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.